Hello and welcome back to this course of videos on Node.js. Now in the last two videos we looked at the HTTP protocol and how it's used for clients and servers to talk to each other, and then we actually created our server in Node.js and made a request to it. What we're going to do in this video is use something called Google Chrome Developer Console to look under the hood of the request that we actually perform to our Node server. So if I Control Shift I, it brings up this console in Google Chrome. I'm using the network tab here, which will give us insight into the request and response that we make. So before I make my request to my Node server, I need to run this code here to begin the server listening. This server.listen piece of code, if you remember. Now, in order to do that, I'm going back to my console and I will run node.createServer, which is the name of my JavaScript file. My server is now listening. So I go back to my console and I can make a request to my Node server, which is on localhost. And within localhost, it's on port 8080. So I make this request to my Node server, and you can see it's registered the request here. Ignore the favicon entry. This is something that Node responds with by default, but it's slightly annoying, but ignore it. We're just interested in the main request that we made to localhost port 8080. So if I drill into here, now we can really see under the hood of the request and response. If you can see here, I'm clicked on the headers tab here. Now, if you recall back to the tutorial we had with the Blackboard where we looked at HTTP requests and response, you notice that both the request and response were broken down into the header and the body. Now, both the request and the response had a header and a body section. Here, we are just being given the header sections of the request and response. Now, we also noted that within the header, it was really broken down into two sections. It was broken down into what we called the title of the header and then the header fields. Now, the title of the header, if you remember in the title of the request header, we had this. We had get in there was one of the things in the request, that the title of the request header. And similarly, in the title of the response header, we had this 200 OK. So these are listed for us up in the general section. Now let's dive down into the header fields. And we'll look at the request header first of all. Now, we mentioned that a very important header field to include in the request object was the host, because the request has to know where it's going. The envelope has to be addressed, and here the request header is localhost 8080. Now, moving over to the response header, we mentioned in the Blackboard video that a very important header field for the response object was the content type, and we actually coded this manually. If we go back to our code, you can see we did response.writeHead, first of all 200 OK, which we can see was communicated back in the response header title, but also we did the content type of text.plain, which we can see is here. So this data is text, and when we respond back to the browser, we need to let it know that the content type is text.plain, so it knows how to interpret it. Now, the last point I'm going to make, which is another header field within the response object, is the transfer encoding, which is chunked. Now, we talked in the very early videos about the the main benefits of using Node.js, and we talked about the control you have over streaming, and streaming is a much more effective way, an efficient way of communicating data back and forth. So you can see here, if we go back to our code, we used streaming. So we did a read stream, and then we piped, if you like, that read stream upon the data event to the response object, which itself is an event emitter and a writable stream. And so we were passing these chunks one at a time. And if you remember, there was 4 chunks. So we said that that was a very efficient way to communicate data, and something that makes Node a very good vehicle to use for particular types of web applications. Now, and you can see here that it's been recorded in the response header that the transfer encoding is actually chunked. So I hope this gives you a good insight under the hood of the HTTP request and response cycle, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.